welcome to devlog number 2. We're continuing to create our visual walkthrough app, basically starting it. So devlog number 1 was just explaining what I'm planning on doing, and now it's the actual work, which I'm super excited about. So what I have in mind today is basically something which is the start of every project. So I want to create my Git repository for the project, which is always a nice thing to start with. Then I want to create the folders for my app. And probably also it makes sense then with the different folders to have some Visual Studio Code workspaces. The idea with those workspaces is that I can quickly switch between parts of my application. So everything will live in a Git repository together. And then I have those folders, and depending on which folder I'm in, I want to be in a different VS Code workspace. And finally, and that's the connection to the Git repository, I want to have some README files. These will probably be some placeholders, but yeah, I'd like to have a bit of explanation what the folders are about and fill them as I go with the project. So that is basically the idea of what I want to do today. So here I'm in my projects folder. I just created a new system, so it's quite fresh, so there is nothing in it. So let's create the first folder for this project. And I think I stick with Visual Walkthrough App for now as a working title. So Visual Walkthrough App. Let's move into that directory, and inside our Visual Work. Maybe I should think about a different name because it's a bit hard to pronounce for me, or I will learn it. So we'll see. Visual Walkthrough App. Let's create a Git repository. And so now that we are having our Git project, it makes sense to have a README file. I'm not entirely sure what I want to add in there, but always a good idea to have one. We get to the content maybe in a moment. So we have the Git repository, we have a README file on the root level, and now I want to create 2 folders, I think. So my application has basically 3 parts. One is recording the steps. I think I said something like defining the steps because I don't want to confuse myself with the recorder. So defining the steps and then playing the steps. So when I'm saying steps, that's like things you would do on a website. So the idea is that I will record screencasts and I can programmatically define what I want to do. I define those steps and I play those steps, and then I will want to record them. In the end, I want to create a video out of that. I think that number 1 and number 2 are actually one folder because I want this to be a browser extension. And I think it makes sense to have both in one browser extension. So if this is our browser and we have our extension here, when I click it, then I can define the steps. And I don't think it makes sense to have another extension to play the steps, but I'm thinking of some kind of overlay that I'm having there, which I have the button to record the steps and then a button to play those steps. And I think it makes sense to have it both in the same browser extension. So I think this could be one folder, and the other folder would be creating the video. So that can be a separate application, and the job of that application, or maybe it's even just a script, is then to automatically perform those steps and record them. So that is the other folder. Now for the naming. It's always a bit the harder part of it. Maybe I really just name that thing browser extension, because the whole thing is my visual walkthrough app. And one part is the browser extension. So we have the browser extension, and then we have the recorder. This app should record things. That's the recorder then. Yeah. All right, let's clear the drawing and create some space for Visual Studio Code. Let's first go into the browser extension folder and open Visual Studio Code in there. And here we now can save our README markdown file in the browser extension folder. So this part here is the browser extension. So one thing that I like to do now is to save this as a workspace. And now it makes sense to not just call this browser extension, but maybe when I'm saying like visual walk through browser extension. So let's go with VW browser extension save, because now we have a workspace file here and we can then distinguish our different parts of the application when we're having different VS Code windows open. Which brings me to a nice extension. It's called Peacock. And with Peacock, you can create random colors around your Visual Studio Code border. And I like that to differentiate quickly between windows, because I generally have the same theme for VS Code in general. And with Peacock, I'm changing the color to random colors basically, and that way I can differentiate it. Very nice. And Peacock is, maybe I can show you the marketplace page. So there you go, Peacock. I will also leave you the link in the description of this video. The nice thing is Peacock can surprise you with random colors, and let's do that. And this is the border color. And I'm usually repeating this until I find a color that I am liking. And when I find a color that I like, then you can use darken, for example, if you want to match it the theme more. So I'm hitting surprise me with a random color until I find a color that I like. And then I click darken to hopefully make it more in tune with my theme. So let's see if we're getting there. Sometimes it darkens into a direction that is not so nice anymore, but I think we are getting there. Let's do one more. Yeah, that's a nice aubergine color. Yeah, that's our visual walkthrough browser extension workspace. And now let's go back to the terminal and go into the recorder folder and open a new Visual Studio Code window there as well, and save the VW recorder workspace. And now let Peacock surprise me with a random color. I like that. Good choice right away. And now let's see if we can darken it a bit to make it nicer. That's what I meant before. Like sometimes you go into a direction that's not what you really wanted to do. Oh, that's nice. So I just used a new random color. So now when I'm switching between those two windows, I think I need to give them the same zoom level. All right, so now when I'm switching between the windows, it's really nice to see that the colors are changing, and that way I know exactly where I am in which workspace. I think in the recorder I haven't created a README file yet, so let's create a new file, and not in the current view, but in our project root, which is a recorder. And there we go. So this is our recorder. And since everything is in the same Git repository, I see all the changes in any editor. There are pros and cons to that. So personally, I like to work with one Git repository, and inside this one Git repository, I have my 2 folders now, which are also then basically 2 VS Code workspaces. And the nice thing about this is that probably when I'm working later, so here is our recorder and here is our extension, there might be some parts of it that need to interact with each other. So for example, there might be a property that I'm referring to, and when I change this in the folder for the extension, then to keep them in sync, if I would have 2 Git repositories, then I would need to make sure that it's also a change there. And with one Git repository, depending on where I am, I can just make this one commit and everything will be in sync. So that's why I like it, that no matter where I am, I can quickly see the changes and then commit them. The other part is that it's a bit like a convenience thing. I don't need to jump into the other VS Code in order to recognize that there was a change or something like that. And the cool thing with VS Code is here as well, that you see where the file is from. So here you then would see that this one here is our README file in the project root. This one is our README file from our workspace. And this here is the README file from the recorder, because currently we're seeing the aubergine, we're in our browser extension. And that is it for now. Let's have a look at the to-dos. What did I write down in the beginning? So we created a Git repository, we created folders, we created workspaces, and we created the README file. So let's give it a nice Git commit message. And for this one, let's not get too creative. Folder naming is hard enough. Git commit messages writing as well. Let's go with initialize project and a nice emoji. That was basically what I wanted to do for today. So now we have a project that is ready to be worked on. And that means next time I'm working on it, I can jump right into my VS Code workspace and continue with writing the extension. I was thinking of doing some planning, but to be honest, I want to code now. So thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye.